Greetings and a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much indeed for joining Global Peace Studies for Sustainable Development in Africa and beyond. Thanks to generous offers by speakers, we discuss pertinent issues of peace building and sustainable development around the world and across Africa. Today is our 190th session and the last for this year. I'm George Mutalemwa, moderating this session on behalf of the Africa Peace and Development Network, MAMA. Our theme today is Clean Energy Transition Dilemmas in East Africa. This theme is based on the Danida-funded project, Charcoal Conflict in Climate Change's Decarbonization Dilemmas, Nodes of Livelihood, Nutrition, Communities, Gender, Migration, and Energy in East Africa. This project involves Makerere University, Uganda, the University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and St. Augustine University of Tanzania. We are privileged to have three researchers present their findings on Uganda today. Dr. Susan Mlangwa, who is a senior sociologist, medical anthropologist, and postdoctoral fellow in this project, focusing on gender and the governance of energy transitions. Welcome, Susan. Dr. Emmanuel Lwankomezi is a lecturer in the Department of Geography at St. Augustine University of Tanzania. He has published on wildlife management, conservation justice, climate change, and clean energy. Welcome, Emmanuel. And last but not least, Ngogo Ngogo is a lecturer in the Department of Geography at St. Augustine University of Tanzania and a PhD student in the field of sociology and climate change. Welcome, Ngogo. It's a pleasure having you all.
Thank you so much.
And everybody on this board, you are all welcome. So you are welcome to share the screen, Ngogo, and start the presentation.
I can, yes, very good. I have it in reserve.
Good.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much. As I have been introduced by Dr. George Mutalemwa, my colleague at St. Augustine University, and also our colleague in the project that we coordinate with the three universities, Copenhagen University, Makerere University, and the St. Augustine University. Actually, in a broad sense of this project, we are looking on the charcoal conflict in climate change's decarbonization dilemmas on the lenses of livelihood, nutrition, communities, gender, migration, and energy in East Africa. In today's presentation, we are going to look on the clean energy transition dilemmas in East Africa, and more specifically in Uganda. Here, I'm with my colleague, Dr. Emmanuel Lwankomezi, who also take us into findings, Dr. Susan Mlangwa, another part of the findings, and also I'll take you through the background and the methodology of our study. Our study mainly, we collected data from Uganda from last year in August to November, and the same data, we have used them to now to present on the clean energy transition in East Africa, more specifically in Uganda. And I think next time we'll look on another data that we have been collecting in Tanzania. So we all know that the global pressure to transition to clean energy is more complex and diverse. If you talk on the sub-Saharan Africa, where 80% of the energy used comes from burning biomass, and then more specifically from charcoal and firewood. And in this percentage, almost 130 million households in Sub-Saharan depend on traditional energy, and more specifically charcoal. In Uganda, 94% of energy use still comes from biomass, primarily charcoal and firewood. And charcoal is the main source of cooking energy in urban areas, and firewood dominates the rural setting. The main drivers here can be population growth and also the demand of energy that are rising sharply because of the infrastructure and also alternatives that lag behind. Charcoal is simultaneously necessity, also touching some parts of livelihood and also a main cause of environmental threat. The transition from charcoal is very essential step that can be taken when the global policies are targeting decarbonization and also climate change mitigation. This shift is not a technical or environmental challenge. It is deeply intertwined with the socio-economic and the cultural fabric of society. Therefore, as climate change intensifies and the pressure mounts for green energy alternatives, it creates pressure and also conflict that reflect broader global dilemmas in energy transition. As we all know that charcoal, beside being a main source of energy, it also plays a decisive role in terms of livelihood and also source of income to many rural and urban dwellers. So in this presentation, we are examining these tensions with our main argument that sustainable energy transition must be grounded in the socio-economic realities and the cultural contexts of affected communities. The research gap that exists from our literatures that we have done, despite of the global discussions and many debates on energy and the decarbonization, there remain a gap in understanding the localized, the social, cultural, and economic implication of transiting. And existing studies focus on charcoal use, for example, how charcoal is causing deforestation and also issues carbon emission. And the many literatures, leaving aside the social cultural importance of charcoal in preparation of the main food among the users, and also the meaning in terms of nutrition and other things pertaining to energy use. Limited attention to how transition affects livelihood, social relation, and cultural practice in resource-dependent communities exist in the literature. Now, the global climate framework emphasizes equitable transition. That is a one-size-fits-all, meaning that if the policy can be implemented, let's say in the northwest, that is maybe Europe or United States or some parts of Asia, they think it can fit all people around the globe, something which is wrong. Failing to account for the unique challenges that are faced by the communities whose charcoal is deeply embedded in daily life and economic system is also existing. This oversight risks marginalizing those most affected by changes, particularly women and the youth who play a critical role in the charcoal value chain. If you can go around during our data collection, you can see men are more involved in terms of charcoal production and whatever, but from that stage up to the end user, you find that the women and children are more engaged in that value chain of charcoal. We therefore argue that charcoal is not only a source of energy, but also a cultural commodity intertwined with the traditional cooking practices and the social identities. So in this study, we have three objectives. One of the objectives is to assess socioeconomic and cultural concerns associated with charcoal production and consumption in Uganda and Tanzania. As I said, in the next presentation, we'll also look at the side of Tanzania. And also to identify and analyze social conflict arising from changes in charcoal value chain. And another objective is to examine how individual, subgroups and communities respond and cope with the challenges of transitioning from charcoal to alternative sources of energy. In this study is supported by the two theoretical framework. The first one is the social constructivism and the conflict theory. In the first theory, the social constructivism, it framing charcoal is not an energy source, but a socially constructed commodity embedded in cultural identities, gender roles, and community livelihoods. The second theory, that is the conflict theory, this one focuses on the power dynamics, inequalities, and the social tensions arising from changes in the charcoal value chain. And also, societal conflicts originate from competing interests and resources distribution inequalities. And therefore, transitioning exacerbates existing social conflict among marginalized communities. Methodology, we start with the study areas I've said. This study was done in three zones, in two zones. The first one was the northern part of Uganda, where we focused in 6 selected districts of Guru, Amuru, Ajumani, Obong, Lira, and Otuke. These areas were selected because the main charcoal producing areas, and also they were among the districts that were affected by the previous insurgency in northern Uganda, and also Kampala are the main charcoal consumption center. So the northern Uganda, in this context, we are referring to an area north of the Nile River, and it shares a border with South Sudan to the north. And in other literature, it may be referred as an area beyond Karuma Bridge. And the data were collected between August and November 2024 in all areas that I have mentioned. The data collection, the key informant interviews were used. We also administered the focus group discussion and the surveys. And the survey was administered to among the household heads. And in this point, for the we had two kinds of data: the qualitative data and the quantitative data. For the qualitative data, that in this context we mean the interviews and the FGDs were purposefully sampled, and also for the surveys, a sample of 200 was computed using the Cochrane's formula of 1977. The core inferential technique used was binary logistic regression with the formula. You can see it here. And the objective was the autonomous presenting either the occurrence coded as 1 or the non-occurrence coded as 0. Socioeconomic or cultural consent, social conflict, and adaptive coping strategies were also incorporated. So at this point, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Emmanuel Lwankomezi, to proceed to where I have ended.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much thank you, Ngogo, for the introduction. Yeah, I will proceed from where he ended. Yeah, can you see me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
we can hear you.
Yes, you're loud and clear.
Go ahead, please, Lwankomezi, we hear you. Lwankomezi, do you hear us?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. I think because of technology, we muted without knowing. Thank you. So what I'm saying is we are looking at the socio-economic and cultural concern associated with charcoal production and consumption. So our findings shows that 74% of respondents felt that charcoal is more reliable in the study area than LPG and electricity. Of course, this was associated with the high cost of other alternatives, LPG, and of course, unreliable electricity and power cutoff, so to say. So when we probed further, most of their respondents was not only attached to issues of affordability or the cost, but we feel that most of the respondents, they preferred charcoal because this is best, connected to their culture in Uganda, because they would prefer charcoal because they would like to, it was used the art that impacted the best flavor or attached it to best flavor and the texture of food, especially tradition dishes and matoke specifically. And of course, you can see one comment from the respondents that charcoal is part of the kitchen tradition. So if you remove charcoal, then it's like removing the art of the cooking. So affordability and availability of charcoal make it indispensable, and that is because charcoal was readily available to most of the people, and therefore people of energy. And of course, if you focus, for example, our findings also probed on the policy, transition policy, and of course this tells us that we should not only focus on cost reduction or alternative fuel, but also we need to find, if you only focus on cost and alternative energy, then you are going to find a lot of resistance, because charcoal is considered to be, it's cultural embedded in people's life in northern Uganda. So some of the narration is that people, they will say, we have been using charcoal for our generations and we have not used this alternative energy. So how can you come and say we should stop using charcoal? So that one brings a lot of dilemma, that people would always prefer to use charcoal. And of course, that's why we are saying it is not very easy to be replaced. In the second objective, of course, we focused on social conflicts. And there were so many conflicts that we encountered that are, existing in the study area. For example, energy policy, which restricts charcoal use, is perceived as an attack, as I have said, on traditional ways of cooking. And we experienced the conflict in the private forest, And this, of course, was related with migration, that people were migrating from other area to come for charcoal. And of course, it's called the gold. This is the gold area. Charcoal is regarded as gold in this in the northern in northern Uganda, and or maybe the black gold, so to say. But we were very much interested with the government ban, because in northern Uganda there is a government decree or a presidential decree on charcoal burning, which of course is existing. And so the main question was why this ban is only in northern Uganda, and what has been the implication of this ban. So what we have seen from our findings, we are saying there is competition for limited resources. And of course, because there is a ban, that one attracts so many people to go to that area and try to
I'm afraid we've lost you, Lwankomezi.
the socio-economic.
Lwankomezi, can you go back like 2 sentences, because or at least I lost you, couldn't hear what you said. Please proceed, Lwankomezi, if you hear me. And Ngogo, are you there?
No, I'm here. Do you hear me?
No, I'm afraid not. Now start. Continue, please.
We have lost the screen share.
Also, we don't see the screen share there. So it seems to be the internet issue there. That's
Yeah, I think so. I normally also have these days have internet connectivity problem. I'm sure the weather is not.
All right, Richard. Thank you for sharing that.
Chair, is it possible that Dr. Ngogo could present?
Yes, can you see me now?
I thought he was very clear, and he had no interruption.
Screen, yeah.
Yeah, please, Ngogo, please, can you proceed?
Yes. Let me share. Yeah, sorry for interruption.
It appears that the screen share is a bit too much load for the system.
Yes. Now I think we can share from the screen itself.
Try presentation mode.
Yes, can you see the screen now?
We can see the screen.
Make it full screen, please.
Yeah, let me try to make it full.
Very good. Okay, we're up and running.
Yes, of course, I will proceed.
The road is a bit muddy.
Good.
Yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, we're good.
Yes, we do.
Okay, I'm very sorry for the interruption. That is internet challenges. Anyway, so I was saying in northern Uganda, there was a presidential decree or presidential ban on charcoal production. And of course, what we realized is that the ban has increased the competition for limited resources. Of course, I said most of the people would come from different areas and, visiting and, extracting charcoal from cutting down trees from northern Uganda. And number two, it has exacerbated environmental harm by ignoring social economic dynamics surrounding charcoal production. Because if you trace the charcoal value chain, it involves so many people who are depending on charcoal for livelihood. Because now you can see there are people who are responsible for charcoal production. There are people who are responsible for charcoal burning. There are people who are responsible for transportation. There are people who are responsible for, so there are so many people who are involved. And then burning charcoal, this one provides what we call environmental harm to most of the people, especially those who are depending on charcoal for their livelihood. Number three, we are saying the ban focused on punishment because there were no any other mechanism to try to either do sustainable charcoal production or enforce on management, but it only emphasized on punishment. What we think in conservation view, that is not a good way to protecting our environment. But another thing is that the ban, of course, neglected the policy and the role addressing deforestation drivers. And here, of course, we are talking on the power relationship. Who is responsible for charcoal conservation? Who is responsible for protection? So this one brought a lot of conflict in terms of power, and there was power conflict between different level of organization. So what we can say, conflict about charcoal is not the question of economic competition, but is also concerned with access, governance, legitimacy, and of course cultural heritage. And the whole business of charcoal in northern Uganda creates what we call the tension around the border, because every time you go, there was impounding of charcoal, harassment, and some sort or similar actions that, of course, are frustrating and are not good in terms of conservation. So there was inconsistent trade regulation, fluctuation in tariffs, because the fines were not equal. That means each district will impose its own way of protection, and that brought a lot of challenges in terms of management. So that tells you that there was a lot of challenge with the ban, but now we have issues of migration, people coming away, from the area, that is the Balalo also, causing a lot of conflict. In the third objective, we are talking about the coping. How do we cope now with energy transition challenges? How do we cope with energy transition challenges? Of course, we are looking at the economic realities. What is the cost of charcoal, and what is the cost of LPG, or what is the cost of electricity? Most respondents, of course, would say they were willing to move to green energy, but because of the cost that is associated with transition, becomes very difficult for them to move from charcoal to clean energy. So it's possible for people to transition, but now it will depend on so many factors. infrastructure, for example, limitations. Most of the families were not connected to electricity. And that one brings a lot of challenges. How can they move to electricity? But also issues of culture. Some people were fearing about gas explosion, that they cannot use gas because of explosion in the house. But now some would say food, as I have said in the first objective, that they would prefer food prepared. So there is also cultural aspects and economic realities. So only 27% of households in Uganda, they had adapted to alternative energy, so they can use LPG, solar, and briquettes. But mostly, these clean energy were only used for emergencies. For example, having to cook these what we call fast foods, like boiling water, frying eggs, and some other simple foods. And those who use the electricity, there is one common term which is called kamilfu. So most of the people who were connected illegally to electricity were able, of course, to use electricity for cooking. So most of the respondents were, of course, using charcoal and firewood. So the reason high upfront price of alternative technology, as I have said, if you talk about the price for, the upfront for buying the cylinder is much more expensive. And of course, most of the people are ready to transition if they can be buying, in liter amount. For example, for charcoal, you have 1,000, 2,000, you can buy the amount for daily consumption. So it's not very common. It is not the same as electricity or LPG. But number two, we have the peer influence and local social norms. Of course, this one was more related or associated with age. People, for youth, it was no problem with what energy is used for cooking. But this one was very sensitive to people, the elderly people, who would prefer their food to be done by charcoal or to be done by firewood. So this one, the youth have no problem with what energy is used for what kind of food. But we have government subsidies were not sufficient. For example, we have an example where the government were offering LPG to local community. So the government were distributing LPG. But what we found out is after they have used that initial gas in the cylinder, when it is done, these people are not able to go for refilling. So they keep them inside. But of course, another aspect was they were only supplying one company. The gas is from one company. And then when the supply is finished, you can't exchange that cylinder with another company. So that one also brought a lot of challenges in people to adopt to green energy. But there is other issues of preference also featured and awareness to green energy. But of course, the last was fear and anxiety of the people to transition to green energy because they were giving an example of, people being electrocuted by, and some other, they were saying houses were burned by electricity. So there was that stereotype that people cannot use electricity inside their houses because they fear to be burned. But of course, another coping mechanism was related with the number of households in the family, because it was seen that in the households where there were few numbers of individuals, they would prefer much to use this green energy than the households that has bigger numbers. Yeah, so thank you so much. That is what I can say. I would like to invite Dr. Susan to proceed.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'll just show myself a bit and then I will go back to hi everyone to removing my video.
Are you going to share?
No, I'm going to use your screen and
Okay.
I'll be telling you to move the slides.
Okay.
So as Emmanuel and Ngogo has already spoken, I am just going to zoom in one of the subgroups, which is the youth, and we are going to try and paint a picture of how they actually experience these charcoal transitions. We're going to paint and see how, or what are their concerns, and how do they respond. And this is an excerpt from a larger chapter on youth experiences in charcoal transitions in East Africa, which will cover both Uganda and Tanzania. But now I'm only focusing on northern Uganda. Let's go to the next slide. So when we were looking at this data on youth, we actually included as well another gap from the literature, which actually talks about there's a need for more nuanced understanding of energy and the interlinked role it plays in society. And by trying to fill this gap, we have looked at the youth as a distinct subgroup and how we can explore a moral economy of energy, which can illuminate how communities negotiate fairness and need under different challenges which they encounter, including the ban which the former speakers have spoken. And such analyses are still invisible in the literature. So across the 6 districts where we conducted focus groups and key informant interviews, I'm using more the qualitative data here. Gulu, Amuru, Adjumani, Obonji, Lira, and Otuki, we found that youth are positioned at the most volatile intersection of livelihood needs, tightening regulations, and limited energy alternatives. For many young people, charcoal work is not just an income source. It is the entry point into the local economy. They take on roles as transporters, loaders, brokers, and small-scale producers, often because there are no comparable opportunities. But as policies tightened and charcoal movement becomes criminalized, youth are particularly affected. They told us that new restrictions feel like punishment without alternatives. Some spoke of increased harassment, bribe demands, and confiscations that make an already precarious livelihood even riskier. One young man explained, and I quote, "We don't have land or machines. Charcoal is the only thing we can start with. When they ban it, they ban our survival." What stands out in this data is that young people do not simply react to these pressures, they engage in mindful, deliberate adaptation, constantly weighing risks, opportunities, and social expectations. Youth described how they consciously evaluate when to transport charcoal, which forests are considered safe, and how to navigate checkpoints. Their decisions reflect a socially attuned agency and not passive survival. Let's go to the next slide. Can you move to the next slide, Ngogo?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Mindfulness is also evident in how they cautiously engage with alternative fuels. As already the first former speakers mentioned, youth are not resistant to new innovations. Let's go to the third slide. They test LPG cylinders. These are liquefied petroleum gas. They test solar devices like solar lanterns in their businesses, in the homes. They also experiment with briquettes. Yet these alternatives are adopted alongside, not instead of charcoal, which then creates a form of hybrid energy use, shaped by affordability, reliability, and peer influence. Within these constraints, we see mindful agency leading to adaptation and not system-level exchange. Youth themselves, they have declared that charcoal is not disappearing. It is being renegotiated. And the hybrid energy practices we observe may in fact represent the subtle and reliable form of transformation that is possible within current socioeconomic conditions. It is incremental, socially grounded, and mindful. Mindful agency leads to adaptation and not structural change. Next slide, please. Hence, overall, this hybridization tells us that the people in northern Uganda, particularly this subgroup, they are navigating with intention, creativity, and caution. Their mindful adaptation highlights both their resilience and the structural limits that shape what kinds of energy transitions are genuinely achievable in northern Uganda. And this has implications for mitigation dialogue. Although hybridization is not mitigation, but it enables it. Hence, talks about climate mitigation in the global south, particularly from what we are seeing in Uganda, must recognize real energy ecologies. And also, it must recognize that the different social groups or subgroups within the communities experience differently and respond differently to the challenges which come with changes in the charcoal value chain. Last slide. Can we go to the last slide? climate mitigation must grow from lived realities. For example, by supporting hybrid energy, we are talking about not substitution or replacement of charcoal, but renegotiation of fuels. And also by removing the structural constraints limiting youth or other subgroups, for instance, women, we can create transitions that are achievable, just, and socially grounded. And this is what we are submitting to the scholars who are studying energy use interlinked with its role in the society. In conclusion, we can say that poverty levels, income dependence, and the lack of cheaper energy alternatives have remained the main factors accounting for charcoal use. Charcoal is a survival strategy for many households. However, we have seen that subgroups, particularly our illustrations from the youth groups, have different strategies to address how to cope with the rapid changes ongoing on the charcoal value chain. Bans and fines interventions strengthen black market activities, corruption, and local resentment. Yet, we are seeing that agency is also being seen or is being used as a way to cope. Findings also indicate that energy resilience is achieved via a hybrid consumption model, coping mechanism, where charcoal is supplemented by alternative fuel sources to ensure consistent energy access. And by this hybrid use, what comes out very strongly is that there is energy security. This is what people are really looking at, but they are not being resistant. Youth consider themselves modern, but being excluded in the process of transitioning to clear energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan and Emmanuel and Ngogo for this excellent presentation, and where you've talked about the dilemmas in the transition from, should we say, dirty energy to clean energy, the use of solar and other renewable energy sources. And particularly, we've talked about unique challenges faced by communities as regards this transition, and particularly the economic and social conflicts because of inequalities amongst people and communities, as well as you pointed out some data saying that 74% of charcoal, of people actually feel that charcoal is more reliable than any other sources of clean energy, and that only 27% use clean energy. And you've also said that there is also need of using hybrid energy. So you use kind of traditional and modern energy sources. And you've talked about issues of poverty, income dependency, and lack of cheaper energy source. So now I would like to open this floor for discussion, and feel free to raise your hand. You can also turn on your camera. I would like to ask to start with Donna. You are welcome, Donna Pido.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You probably explained this, but I didn't get it. Why have you not spoken anything about wind power?
All right. So the question is, if you have heard wind power, would you like to say something about it? So any of the presenters may respond.
Yeah. Yes, maybe here. Yeah, we have potential wind power sources areas in Africa, and I think we don't have like a proper technology to harness wind power. And in most African countries, the wind power extraction is still low in terms of adoption of technology, and also the use of diesel wind to generate electricity is not yet been adopted in many African countries.
I would add from what you have said. Of course, we asked the respondents to list the energy sources that they would prefer to use, or if they are to transition from charcoal to other energy. And it's very unfortunately that wind power was not among the list. Thank you.
I will also add that from the youth, some of them were very informed about many innovative ways to transition from charcoal, but they felt that their voices were not heard. So there are some very learned youth from northern Uganda who know wind energy. Therefore, they are limited in terms of how they can actually advise the relative parties who can push for that. As Ngogo said, we do have sites, but we do not have yet the technology.
All right, thank you so much, Daniel. Naila, you're welcome.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. At some point, you cited high cost of LPG as one of the reasons behind charcoal preference. But I am curious to know whether because you cited also the installation cost, like the cost of cylinder and whatever, being expensive. But in most experiences, in long run, given the costs associated with the bans and the compliance costs, it normally appears that in the long run, gas is cheaper than charcoal. So did you have to consider the long run application of gas vis-a-vis the use of charcoal? Thank you.
Maybe I can start. It's true that you're saying in the long run, gas could be cheaper, but there's also what we found. It is in how you purchase or how you consume gas. People in the northern Uganda currently are able to buy charcoal in packages which they can afford, in little bits which they can consume daily or at any time which they wish to use them. And this is not yet transferable to gas. When you use gas, you have to buy a cylinder. And for some of them, this is expensive for now. And especially so focusing on the production zone. It is a different story when we come to the central consuming zone, that is Kampala, which we have we've not included the findings in this presentation. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Naila. I accept with your observation. But what we have said, of course, if you look at the conflict that we are referring to, there are different conflicts that happen in line with energy use. And that's why, of course, I said conflict about charcoal are not the question of economic competition, because what we saw, there is issues of peer pressure, cultural dependence, and traditional ways of life. So it is not necessary that LPG is much expensive compared to charcoal, but it's also embedded on cultural and traditional ways of life. And that's why we are saying if we are to come up with a policy, then we should not only focus on economic facilitation or empowerment. We should also look at the traditional way of life, because if you don't focus on that, then the policy will face a lot of resistance. So local community believe that charcoal is very cheaper compared to other sources of energy. But as a researcher, we also understand that if you do the analysis, if you remove the cost of installation, the upfront cost, then you may realize the issue of traditional and cultural preference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hubert, are you there?
Yes, I'm there, yes, but I pull out. It's okay. It's another string of discussion. Maybe I come back later. Thank you.
Okay, good. Good to see you. Hi, Jim. Jim? Jim, can you ask your question or make your comment, please? We can also share experience, of course, from our own realities. Jim, are you able to speak?
He might be muted.
He's now muted. Now, Odoch, could you proceed, please? Nice to see you.
Thank you. And presenters, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One, given that charcoal is a more recent type of fuel, especially in the areas you mentioned where you did your field research, the question would be, whose culture are you talking about in this regard? Especially when
sorry, Odoch,
mentioned...
could you repeat your question from the beginning? Could you repeat your question from the beginning? We didn't hear the first part of it.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I said that given that charcoal as a source of fuel is recent, in fact, I could even say is urban, this brings into question what you mean by cultural context, especially when you mention cultural heritage. That is one question. The second question is, it seems there is some type of confusion between where charcoal is being mined and where charcoal is being consumed. Can you therefore clarify to us whether the areas where you have done your study is also the same area where charcoal is greatly consumed? Up to 75% of your respondents, no, 74% of your respondents saying they prefer charcoal. Those are my two questions. The others are comments.
Yeah. Yes, maybe start from the first question on, you said charcoal is more recent, and why do we say that it's embedded into cultural issues? Yes, charcoal can be a recent source of energy, especially in the rural areas, where at first people used to use firewood, and as now forests have been degraded and diminished, some are now transitioning into using charcoal. So if we can refer on the energy transition ladder, you can see that in some part of the community, especially from the rural areas, are still transitioning from using either animal dungs or wastes into firewood, and firewood into charcoal. And in some areas where we visited, those who have transitioned into charcoal, they feel having like high status of using charcoal stove. But in urban areas, charcoal has been there since 1970s and some years there. And now it has created some kind of cultural life and also cultural way of preparing some food. And that's why we said those cultural drivers or cultural aspects that are embedded in charcoal use are now the ones that make them to remain intact with charcoal. Is a new shift is now coming of using, let's say, electricity or sometimes using gas. Now, leaving those cultures that they have into cooking, let's say, matoke. Matoke is banana, boiled banana, which is a common food in Baganda. Now, leaving charcoal and using electricity to cook that kind of food can be so difficult for them. And that's why we say charcoal, it has most meaning in terms of the cultural and the social life of many people, especially those who are living in suburban and urban areas. Yes, Emma, second question.
But the area where you are doing your study in northern Uganda, do they eat matoke on a regular basis, like morning, noon, and night?
In some areas, especially Guru. Guru is the second largest city in Uganda. Is one of the urbanized area, and we found that people are now eating matoke, and it has become their culture of eating that kind of food, and supplemented with other food like rice and some other food that are being eaten in the urban area.
Yes, thank you. I will go for the first, maybe a little bit, and then for the second question. Yeah, of course, if you look at the community in northern Uganda, those are the typical Ugandan, of course, that consume staple foods like matoke, cassava, potatoes, etc., etc. So there are traditional ways on how those foods are made. And of course, they reflect exactly what we are talking about. Coming to the second question, that why is most of the people in that area using charcoal? Of course, yes. The northern Uganda is considered as a charcoal production area, because in this study, we have two categories. We have the production area, in Uganda, for example, which is considered to be the northern Uganda, and we hypothesized that the Kampala was the consumption area. But in the production area, most of the people equally are using charcoal because it's very easy now. It's very easy because they get it from their farm. The family, burns the charcoal from their farm, and they can use the charcoal for cooking. But mostly in this area, charcoal is supplemented with firewood. So firewood and charcoal are the most used energy in the area of the study. But this area is considered as a production area because most of the charcoal comes from this area and they are transported to other places. But still, people are also using charcoal for their survival and cooking and livelihood. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Lester and then Mhache. Welcome, Les.
Thank you so much. This is a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for your research and for sharing it with us. This is a reminder of why to attend this webinar. Really, I learned a lot. You know, I'd never thought about charcoal as part of the whole picture of energy, and it's really, really enlightening presentation. I just wanted to mention real quickly, there's, you know, the people in Bhutan who developed this idea of gross national happiness economy, and they talked about different types of capital. And I had a document I put in the chat that shows that there's human capital, natural capital, built capital. And I find it fascinating how this research shows the importance of things like cultural, social, and cultural capital in trying to figure out what to do about this climate crisis. But my question, I do have a question that I'm just wondering what prompted you folks to do this research, and how you ended up, if you'd say something about how you ended up with this wonderful collaboration among the different universities, is a little something about the process.
I think, Susan, you can respond on that. Dr. Susan, please.
Okay, thank you. So this is a grant from Danida, which was awarded to Professor Ole, who is a professor in Copenhagen University, in partnership with St. Augustine University, who are actually contributing to the social cultural aspect of the research, and Makerere University, the human rights wing, who are contributing on the legal side of the project. At the same time, Professor Ole and his team are on the policy side. So we wrote this grant together, the three institutions. Unfortunately, today there are some here, I think, from Makerere. I'm not very sure if we have anybody from Copenhagen.
There are some, yes.
Okay, beautiful. And it's a grant which started in the 2023 and going all the way to 2027. And the locations of the study is Tanzania and Uganda. I don't know if this is enough. If there's further questions, I can answer.
All right, I'm sure he will have a follow-up question. Let's now turn to Mhache. You're welcome. Mhache, if you are there, please. Peter, would you like to go next?
Thank you. I just want to share my screen for a moment to show my high-tech Western cooking high technology. Currently, this is how we make much of our food here in Vermont. It is not up to charcoal as yet. That's probably well into the future. But you see, we get your hot water from the tank closest to you there, and the wood goes in the firebox at the far end. It also warms the house considerably. Thank you. I just wanted to share, just in case we get on our high horse about how these primitive people are cooking.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing that.
May I ask a question on that? Is it wood fueled?
Yes, it is chopped and split by yours truly. We have an overabundance of firewood here, and I have had the ash tested, and it does contain cesium-137, a radioactive element, isotope, and that is the cheapest thing to test for, so that probably means there is also strontium-90 and other quite deadly elements in it. This is the case all across America and probably the rest of the world. And in my work with Veterans for Peace, we are attempting to document these levels so that people can know what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mhache, are you able to speak now?
Okay. Am I heard, George?
Yes, we hear
Hello,
you.
George? You are getting me, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I also congratulate the presenter for a good presentation. And the experience I have is that most of the charcoal are produced in rural areas and consumed in urban areas. And I also know that most of the people in urban areas, they have originated from the rural area. So they have come in the urban area with their culture. So telling them to use the alternative energy sources can also be a problem. That's why one of the challenges is that the people, they want to eat the food which have the flavors which they have come up with the rural areas. My question goes to the police because our policies are not effective in such a way that, for example, people who are making charcoal in the urban areas, in the rural areas, when they bring it in the urban areas, they also pay revenue to the government. So that can also be a challenge because if the government is still collecting revenue from that, that can also be a challenge. My advice is that if possible, they can increase the tax or the tariff on that, and that will reduce the charcoal coming to the urban areas, and the people automatically will be switching to alternative energy sources. That's my take on that presentation. Thank you, Dr. Josh.
Thank you so much, brother. Donna, if you could ask your question, make your comment, and then they will respond, our speakers.
I wanted to point out that the reason most of the glass beads in this world are made in northern Bohemia is because of a forest there. And when Peter is showing us his classic wood cooker, he's telling us he comes from Vermont. Does everybody know that Vermont is a continuous forest and it keeps replenishing itself? And why that's important to me is for these other reasons that I've just described, but also in northern Uganda, I just asked Obot, what are we doing at home in northern Uganda to replenish the wood that we're converting into charcoal? Because we know that there's a lot of charcoal production in northern Uganda. And the local Acholi and other communities are doing that, but the government of Uganda and other communities in Uganda are deliberately punishing the northerners by harvesting trees, coming in without permission and without any arrangement whatsoever, and chopping down the trees that belong to the people of northern Uganda. And I was going to ask what's being done about replenishment, and that's an issue that we may need to discuss at some point. But let me turn it over to that guy you see right back there. That's Odwaj, and he knows about it better than I do. I just know that we're losing our trees and they're not being replaced at a rate that's going to keep us in good production status with charcoal. Odwaj.
Bwana Mutalema, do I add here or I wait for my turn?
Yeah, of course. Please do. Donna has asked you, so please do.
Yeah. Huh? I think what she has just said is interesting. I've read a lot of charcoal-based papers or researches from northern Uganda. So this presentation, forms. I hear this presentation in the backdrop of what I've read and therefore what I know. The struggle for the control of resources in northern Uganda is fundamental, should have been fundamental to this study, so that I wish you had looked at it in a way that is perhaps economically driven, but also politically driven. And in mentioning economics of charcoal, I thought you would have said charcoal is the demand for charcoal goes beyond urban centers, because there is one document I read suggesting that charcoal finds its way to the Middle East and other countries abroad. So that's what I would add based on Donna's submission. I wanted to also mention, and maybe I can use this opportunity to do that, that I would have wished to hear more recent research or experiments regarding briquettes, charcoal, firewood, and other sources of energy in northern Uganda. It would have been very, very interesting. I know when wind energy was mentioned, it would have been very interesting to hear the impact of rural electrification in that part of Uganda. It would have been very interesting to hear the conversion of other forms of energy, including, I think you mentioned something on cow dung. It would have been very interesting to see what experiments have been done using or elevating cow dung, including the designs of wood cookers that are very, very efficient, very economical on wood fuel. Those would have been my comments and perhaps proposal to my colleagues so that we can hear more and more about this form of energy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I would like also to recognize colleagues from Uganda, Makerere University and Copenhagen. Probably you have got something to share, maybe to respond to some of these questions or to the presentations. So you please feel free to say something. You are welcome. I see Sylvie, Emily, and Obo. And Peter, would you like to say something? Please go ahead. You've just muted your microphone, Peter.
I was trying to lower my hand.
I
Donna
see.
brings up a very, very important point. Here we do have forests. I manage about 200 acres of forest. We are now seeing increasing infestations of insect, killing trees. We have various climate problems, including forest fires. And our forests are heavily stressed. The wildlife, we have to maintain corridors between blocks of forest in order for the wildlife to survive. And it's a losing battle. It's an uphill battle now. So we are in the same condition everywhere. When I was in Nigeria in the 60s as a kid, firewood was a long walk already. And the woman would walk and walk and walk and carry bundles, hack little bits of scrub. It is a very, very serious problem. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I so appreciate this research. I had heard this before a year or two ago on this forum, and I'm very happy to find it the focus now. And this, I would remark that we have a larger audience today than we have in a while. So it is touching people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Donna, would you like to say something?
Well, I think I typed it in the chat already. Somebody mentioned as an alternative fuel. It's very, very good, very efficient, but it smells awful. And nobody likes to burn cow dung because that tells all the neighbors that you ran out of charcoal and wood and everything else. Okay, bye.
All right. Thank you so much.
maybe some addition.
Yeah.
That
Can you allow
yeah,
the
from
Makerere to
Odochi's
finish?
So Ngogo, you wanted to say something, right?
yes, maybe my colleague from Makerere, they can add after me. Yeah, I want just to add something from Odochi that when we were in the northern part of Uganda, we saw some initiatives like the Kijani and some other organizations that are bringing some new ideas of adoption. Like the Kijani are coming with an initiatives where they want to grow trees for charcoal production that can be sustainable charcoal production. And we saw some other initiatives in Ajumani where some groups are now making some briquettes and sell them to people. And still the challenge is people are used to charcoal. And whenever you bring a new concept or a new idea, it also has some challenges because even the Kijani's initiatives for planting trees for charcoal, it was not like a final alternative because people said those trees that can be planted for short time cannot be suitable for charcoal production because they are so soft, and yet they need charcoal that have been extracted from all the trees, like hardwood trees that make charcoal, which is very hard. So all those initiatives were there, and I think also they meet the same challenge on how they can be adopted by people. And also, finally, I think charcoal now, if you look on the landscape of charcoal in the northern part of Uganda, is now militarized. You see the military is heavily engaged in charcoal, and even respondents said there are some military trucks that are also loading charcoal from the Zoka forest, where the military trucks can have access to that forest and have charcoal and take them to Kampala. And also some other trucks we saw, for example, some other trucks that were impounded in Ajumani. At first, they were labeled as having forest product apart from charcoal, and they were sealed with the Uganda tax revenue authority. Then, when they were inspected, they found that charcoal was inside. So you can see how the business is turning from being a normal business into being illicit business among the people. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Ngogo. Any comments from our colleagues in Uganda or Denmark? Probably they are thinking about that. Yes, Sylvie.
Good evening, Professor Fred. Yes.
Good evening to you. How are you?
Good evening. Fine, thank you. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
Okay. Apologies. I've been trying to attend to some issues over here, but I've also been following at the same time. And I want to congratulate you upon organizing this event and sharing some preliminary findings from our joint research, our collaborative research project. Yes, I think from our side, definitely just to confirm that we are actually on the same page in terms of the findings with the SAUT team in terms of the findings on the charcoal conflicts in climate change dilemmas in Uganda. And yes, I can confirm that of course the study does characterize the northern part of Uganda as the production hub for charcoal in the country, and then Kampala, which is in the central, as the consumption hub for charcoal. And that in fact we also can confirm from the Macquarie University team that Northern Uganda has presented some very unique findings for us to reflect upon, particularly with regard to issues on conflict theories and conflict dynamics in the country. Of course, we know that we can confirm that the country, of course, in the northern part of the country has been through almost 20-year, close to 20-year plus of conflict. And that the natural resource dynamics in that part of the country, in the northern part of the country, cannot be understood without contextualizing the history of northern Uganda. And that indeed, every time we spoke to respondents in the field, they always made this connection to the conflict, that they, particularly the main theme that of displacement and the many years that were spent in the internally displaced people's camps, which then saw them leave their lands. And then that actually gave time for trees to mature and grow, so that now by the time it's time for them to leave the camps. So as they left their lands and in the natural environment flourished, they as a community, as peoples where they were in the camps, were losing elders, they were losing culture, they were losing memory, they were losing their connection to their land and their natural resources and their culture that then connects them to the land. So now after the war, upon returning to from the IDP camps, there's challenges first of all around identifying their land. That's number one. And then even if the land has been identified, there is issues around lost cultures because the elders that used to preserve the culture are gone, either due to the conflict or they have lost that institutional power that they used to have that was embedded in the in the cultural system that was thriving during peace times. And so those elders and the culture were very important in terms of protecting the environment and the trees. Because indeed, as we also confirmed, the trees, certain types of trees do have spiritual and cultural significance. But because of that disconnect that was caused by the war, you then have a break in the continuity between, a generational break between the youth and the older generation, the elder generation. And so then there is a weakness there in terms of youth who are now willing to sell off plots of land that contain these trees that have historical, ancestral, and spiritual significance among, the cultural communities in some of the cultural communities in northern Uganda. So there's that disconnect that then allows for easy access to, communities from mostly central part of Uganda or Kampala, to easily cut the trees that can then produce charcoal that can be transported to Kampala for sale. But at the same time, we also discover other youth populations that are organizing in the form of some sort of vigilante groups to try and prevent this what they perceive to be some sort of attack against their cultural identity via the deforestation for charcoal burning. So you do have that connection to the through a conflict lens. And then, of course, militarization also gets added to the mix. Because as our colleagues may have shared, the charcoal regulation framework in Uganda has been militarized. The president did pass a directive where he was basically empowering the Uganda People's Defense Forces to oversee the ban of commercial charcoal production and trade in northern Uganda. But what we did find interestingly is that there is also a perception that during that time of the war in northern Uganda, the UPDF, there's a strong perception that the military had an advantage of access to these lands and these natural resources, and observing and documenting and knowing where the good trees were, and there was a close link that was made between, deforestation, illegal trade in timber and charcoal trade that has come to since then be dominated by some officials from the military. So you presented with a paradox where the same institution that has been given power to oversee the charcoal ban also does have powerful actors therein who are benefiting from the charcoal business and the timber business. But of course, we're not focused on timber, but we did find very prominently also that connection with timber. And so then you also have that angle, that perception among the communities in the northern part of the country that the military intervention is not really helping to preserve the cultural and environmental legacy of some communities there, but it's actually just facilitating the continuing illegal extraction of these natural resources via the charcoal trade, with limited avenues for meaningful prosecution, and meaningful citizen-led activism and preventative measures. And so this is the dilemma, part of the dilemma that we have found. There's a lot we have found, but of course, for purposes of time, we cannot begin going into everything, but just to confirm the dilemmas in terms of the preliminary findings that our colleagues have also shared. But also largely to confirm that also, in as much as the state is purporting to control the supply side of charcoal, there is a clear gap in the state meeting the demand side of energy, affordable and accessible energy resources for Ugandans, because it was very clear to us, it has become very clear to us now that people are actually willing to move away from charcoal, but as long as the state is not providing cheap, accessible alternatives, they will keep using the charcoal. So what we are finding is that actually the demand side, the state is and this is also part of our preliminary findings in Tanzania, because when we have so far done some partial field work in Tanzania, and we think that the Tanzanian government has actually tried to do a little bit more compared to the Ugandan side in terms of actual state-led initiatives towards the transition, but it's still not adequate, which has led us to some preliminary findings that the states are actually demanding transitions from the communities, but they're not actually providing a clear pathway to those communities in terms of a pathway to accessible access to clean and cheap cooking fuels. So both countries are actually stuck in this cycle of the state demanding some sort of compliance, but then not actually fulfilling or creating conditions that can allow the communities to comply, and then also creating interventions that are militarized, that are not very effective, and in some cases are actually making the situation worse. Well, in Tanzania, we are still trying to conclude some findings around militarization, but we can see that the militarization is more pronounced, is clearer in Uganda than in Tanzania. It seems in Tanzania, in as much as we have the the forestry services that the Tanzania Forestry Services that have some paramilitary trainings and approaches compared to the Ugandan side. It is not as, the militarization is not as institutionalized as obvious. But still early days, so we're still analyzing, and I just want to thank the Tanzania team for this initiative to share the preliminary findings, and I welcome further engagements as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sylvie. So now we take 3 more. Richard, Afiz, Judith, and of course, Evelyn, don't go away. Richard, briefly, please.
Okay, thank
Since
you.
we are running out of time.
Okay, I will not take much of your time. I'm so happy to have this clean energy treatment myself, and I thought, yes, it will be difficult on the part of the government, because if no access to clean energy is given to those in the hinterland, then of course they'll be angry and then fight back. And I also thought that when the research was taken within the local people, where those who use charcoal may be many, and then was not taken within the urban area to where those who don't use charcoal also many. Looking at it, it means we are dealing, the research is favoring the local, communities. And for that matter, I agree with what they brought up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Richard, Afiz, please.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation on charcoal. Like last month, I tried to use both charcoal and gas to cook. And funny enough, the charcoal own was able to dawn before the gas. So I didn't take note of that until when we start discussing this now. So I think we should try to look into it if charcoal is more faster than the alternative that they provide. And also, secondly, what I've seen so far is the economic and social political implication of charcoal and other alternatives that is being available, including the climate change issue. But have you ever tried to consider the spiritual aspect or cultural aspect of using charcoal? Because on the surface, there is a reincantation in Yoruba that we said, Iku kin joshe. I will interpret in English. Iku kin joshe, arun kin je ekisa, aje kin je edu. Edu is called charcoal in Yoruba language, edu. And what the reincantation is saying is that the witch cannot eat charcoal. So with that aspect, I think there is more spiritual interpretation of using charcoal. I'm just trying to, if you can consider that aspect, if possibly you can deep down to see the cultural value of using charcoal. So perhaps that may prove further that we don't need to replace one alternative with charcoal, but to enhance our using these tools as a means of getting our things done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Judith, please.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the wonderful full presentation on charcoal as a resource and cooking fuel in this discussion. I agree with all the comments and the questions going around. I'm a PhD student at Gulu University, also under the scholarship of Danida, under the Upchain project, Unlocking the Potential of Green Charcoal in Northern Uganda to Mitigate Climate Change. So in this, I would want to say that I also did data collection in parts of Uganda, the northeastern and central Uganda. I would say that part of my preliminary finding that hinges on financing renewable energy finds that due to energy poverty, the paradox of the north being the production center and the urban area being consumption area gets changed in a way that when it comes to briquette production, or what I call green charcoal in my study, I realized that when you go to some of the slums of Kampala, that is where you find the business is very booming, because the NGOs and the government try to support what I call the self-help groups to reduce the impact of deforestation. But amazing, the people to by Sylvia do not have access to any affordable energy. Just from the market vendors of charcoal, and then later on produce fuel that they partly use to cook and yet partly sell and partly survive on. And I was amazed to find a number of places when I went deep down the slums, and to me that was very amazing. Bearing the presidential directive and other militarization, you find that, yeah, in Uganda, in terms of household energy transition, not everyone is on board. We have those that have been left out, those that are in the middle, and those that are high there. And then there's a lot of energy stacking because every household tries to find what they can put their hands on to make their ends meet at the end of the day. So you find, you know, there are different associations, different relationships, different when it comes to energy or green or renewable transition. So a lot is yet to be researched, actually, different angles to reach where we are going. That is what I needed to contribute, just to supplement other discussions that have been going on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you everyone actually for your patience and for being with us. If Evelyn wanted to say something, please just for a minute, and then we are going to conclude. And as I said at the beginning, since this is the last one for this year, we are going to stay behind and exchange ideas and contacts if you wish, and then wish each other, one another, the best for the coming year. Evelyn, would you like to say something? All right, then I would like to thank the speakers for your time, for sharing your preliminary findings with us. This has been very enriching, and I thank everybody for your contribution, for being here with us. And we look forward actually to the second episode when you present to us on Tanzania, and later on also on, you know, we'll hear also from our colleagues in Denmark as well as we put together our findings. So thank you very much indeed, and I wish you all the best. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.